Hi, everyone. Welcome back. And we're super happy to be here for today's conversation. It's
Hello.
Sammy Love again and Emma Cardinal here from Birth Middle Way. And today we are super excited to navigate a conversation around a concept, an idea that everyone is always doing the best that they can in every moment, in every situation. What if we were to perceive through the lens of compassion to the extent of landing in a perception that everyone is doing their best? Everyone is doing their best based on the set of experiences and the information that they have been exposed to. What if we bring this idea into the realm of birth, into the scope of the birth world? What if we put that idea onto every mother who is making decisions about her upcoming birth? What if we put that idea on every birth worker, on every doctor, on every nurse, on every birth keeper, every doula, every midwife? What if we extend that beyond birth and start to explore some of the more deeply misaligned behaviors that we can see in the world? And what if even in those situations, we are able to come into a space of understanding and compassion that maybe that person has experienced the exact amount of pain that they're perpetuating or the lack thereof?
Oh, this topic reminds me a lot of a conversation that my partner and I had. I can't recall exactly when this was, but I remember being in the car and I was describing a process that I was moving through because I had received a lot of projection, a lot of judgment, a lot of criticism after Floyd died. And I described what I was feeling as implicit compassion. What I mean by that is if we knew every single thing that a person had experienced, which is not possible, but if we were able to access that information, if we could be able to view not just the entire discography of somebody's life, but the way they felt in all of their experiences, we would have compassion. If we knew everything that there was to know, compassion would be the only thing that we could feel. However, we can't because we are human and we are limited. So what if we adopted a practice of implicit compassion where we can view somebody, view an experience and recognize, wow, if I knew every single thing there was to know about that experience, I would be sitting here full-bodied compassion right now. But because I can't get there logically, and know every single detail, can I trust that I would get there? And can I practice by bringing myself there now without having to have all of that detail, all of the statistics, all of the information to back up that experience of compassion?
Right, right. And that's, I think the word that you said there that's the most important is the word practice,
Mhm.
because it's a practice. Right, we before this call, we always kind of have this debrief, this moment to connect and chat a little bit, and so we brought up this topic quite early on in our debrief, and then we kind of were following, the thread of conversation, and another topic came up, and I had been speaking some of my judgment, some of my biases around a specific topic that we will explore one day. We'll keep you guys hanging on that one. But I was like, wow, how beautiful that we had set the intention to have this topic and this conversation today. Because it's really important that we have this conversation early on so that we can, attempt to practice catching ourselves, catching our own biases, and at least exploring with curiosity, right? Like some of the topics we're exploring are quite strong topics. Edgy. I'm like, what's the adjective here? And like yeah, I have strong opinions on some of them, and so, and they are like rooted in some level of judgment, right? And so, how can we actively, in the wake of our own judgments, biases, etc., also try to weave this in as a practice, right? And I think it's really rooted again in curiosity, which is something we've spoken about on this podcast, which I just feel like is such a divine, expansive, high frequency orientation to be curious in life, be open to understand or see something that you
Well,
haven't
and
before,
well,
right?
so, but curiosity as
And
well.
so,
Curiosity, compassion do not negate accountability and responsibility. So we can do our best to
right,
also hold both,
right,
right? So as an example, I could have
right,
compassion that the medical system is trying to do their best in the ways that they know how with the information that they have at hand. They are trying to do their best for mothers, babies, families, people. And there are some problematic things that occur within the walls of a hospital setting. How can we show up and ask for accountability and
right,
responsibility? How can we still allow there to be change if that's needed? You know, finding that middle way.
right, right. Exactly. Exactly.
Totally.
I mean, and the same thing can be said for the Free Birth Society on the opposite end of the spectrum, right? Is
Hmm.
like there's lots of beauty and there's space to be curious of why certain rhetorics are spoken the way that they are, but like, yeah, I guarantee that if we were to trail that back to the humans that are, perpetuating these ideas, that there'd be a very human
And I
reason
spoke to my therapist the other
for it
day, and
all.
she said that exact
And
thing. She was like, with every single circumstance, even the most heinous, even the most difficult, if you took the time to understand where they were coming from, you would you would have compassion. You just would, because they're humans, you know.
right, right. 100%. And it's something that as a therapist myself, I'm constantly bringing that specific semantic like to my clients, right? In this world where there's such high standards for every detail of our existence that are, I mean, ultimately in many ways unobtainable, right? And the
Hmm.
stress, the lack of self-worth, the insecurity, the shame, the guilt, all of these things that come in to someone's field and consciousness in the wake of feeling like they can't do it all. It's like I'm constantly bringing people back to that. Like, let yourself be human. Let yourself make mistakes. Let yourself be messy. Let yourself need rest. Let yourself undulate between different ideas, between different moods, between different everything. Like the only constant is change. And so, I think the place in which in my life this teaching really dropped in like a way that it landed in my bones. I feel like I spent 3-4 years working in high crisis homeless shelters, and I loved it. Especially off the bat, I really really loved that opportunity to get to know people in the shelters. Like I genuinely enjoyed sitting down and asking them about their story, and when I heard the stories, just having that, even just orientation alone to want to hear the stories, it wasn't a common thing I felt like a lot of the staff were doing, but to sit down with them, it was one of the most profound experiences of my life because it all made sense. They were the most unwell people in the city that weren't in prison. They were some of the biggest criminals in the city that weren't in prison. In fact, in the time that I worked there, my bike got stolen twice from in front of my house because my house at the time was on one of the main streets. And both
Hmm.
times I went to work and found my bike and, received it back, obviously, both times with an upgrade once they put a gear kit on my little beach cruiser bike, and the second time they put a basket. So I was like, thanks for the upgrades, guys. Please don't steal my bike, But they're every day they're engaging in criminal activity. Like they would walk in, 11, 12 p.m. with like 4 bike tires on both of their shoulders, just, so that they could sell that in order to get the drugs, in order to survive. In order to survive, okay? And this is the thing, I grew up like hearing adults speak a rhetoric of like, oh, all my tax dollars are just going to this group of people to be able to drink alcohol and just waste all of my hard-earned money on drugs and alcohol. And the interesting thing is that I discovered that was true. On Welfare Wednesdays, there were more overdoses to respond to. And what I came to see so strongly is I would choose 100% of the time to work a 9 to 5, to put 40% of my taxes towards whatever, have a healthy family, have a home, have a bed, have a fridge full of food, have the capacity to go on a vacation once a year. The lifestyle, there's no comparing the two lifestyles, right? And then we often see in situations like this rhetoric come in of like, well, why don't you just go get a job? Why don't you just do this? Why don't you just do that? Because we're projecting our own capacity to just do that onto somebody who does not have the capacity to just do that. And so that's what we're doing 100% of the time, right? We're projecting our consciousness onto everybody else. We expect that the human experience that others are having is parallel.
It's that same quote
to the
or that
human
same
experience that
phrasing
we're having.
Well, if I was you, I would just, or like if I was in your shoes, but
Right,
but
exactly.
that statement is inherently flawed. Because if you were in my shoes, you would do exactly what I would do
Exactly.
if you were me, because you wouldn't be you.
Exactly.
You would be
Yes,
experiencing a
that's the
whole other
point.
set of circumstances because you would be a totally different human being. And in the grander scheme of things, away from this
Exactly.
idea of judgment, right? Because judgment isn't bad. Judgment's not wrong. It's not an evil
Right.
thing. Judgment helps us to discern when it's approached in a healthy way. But
Exactly.
yeah,
Judgment can also just help us see ourselves and where we're not whole, where we are triggered, where we have certain beliefs, where we have certain perceptions. Like if we are humble enough to catch the trigger and get out of the narrative that we're projecting onto someone else and be like, wait, why do I have this judgment? And it doesn't mean that you have to change the judgment, right? Like some of these topics we were exploring again, like I'm saying, like I'm still in those beliefs. That still feels real and true to me. I have a judgment and there's a belief and I'm still in that, and like maybe there's some shadow. Maybe, in a few years that will come full circle and I'll see these things differently or have maybe more compassion, have more spaciousness, more grace. I don't know, but also not going to shame myself for being where I'm at because what I know about myself, and this is where it comes down to self-worth, right? This is where our relationship to ourself is crucial because I'm willing to give myself permission to be where I'm at, right? I know that overall my intentions and my heart in this world are good. I want to see the world prosper. I want to see an end to war. I want to see women birthing in not only the safest, but for sure the safest, but also the most expansive, ceremonial, healing, transformative
well, and so
ways.
this is the,
And so I
well, I was
pursue
just going
that.
to say that this is the
And
difference between
go
just
ahead.
having blind judgment and being in relationship with our judgment and being able to hold it instead of throwing it at somebody, being like recognizing it, holding it, looking at it and saying, wow, I'm having a judgment here. There's a bias of mine that is really coming forward, or I am criticizing this individual over here for their choices. I'm going to sit with that and reflect. What does that mean for me? What is that bringing up in me? How can I give myself permission to be here, but recognizing that it is an entire projection, 100%. And I can't be throwing my experience at someone else because they're in their own experience.
Exactly.
Mm.
Exactly. And so how can I be curious about that experience? And, like, so here's the intersection, right? Because okay, there are certain things that cross moral lines, right? Like going back to the criminals in the shelters. Like what I'm saying is like
Mhm.
when I heard the stories, like extreme stories, you guys, like extreme of the extreme, like some stories that I've heard, I don't know that most of the listeners' consciousness would even be able to create that idea. You know, like it's like jaw to the floor. Oh my God, like I am so humbled in the wake of your story type of stories. Right? And so it's like again what you're saying is like no, if that had happened to me as a child or like likely I would be sitting right next to you in this shelter. Like I don't know that
Mhm.
I would be in a different space, right? And it's like even exploring the thread between epigenetics, which is how experience influences our genetic expression versus genetics, just, how we
Mhm.
are is, baseline on with our genetic makeup, even that it's like that's so that's uncontrollable. It's like that's just how we are. We come in with a certain genetic makeup that's going to play itself out. Then we experience certain experiences that as a child are really actually in most ways out of our control. So that comes in to now influence our genetic makeup. And so our biology is actually being influenced by our experience. I mean, in Ayurveda and Chinese medicine, they even teach that the energetic of our moment of
Mhm.
conception influences who we are on an energetic, spiritual, biological level, right? So like we can't understand the depth of the nuances that are influencing a person's consciousness and psyche and decision making. Simultaneously, that doesn't mean this pathway of exploring compassion means that we just justify
No,
and
and
thus
that's where,
allow any and
well,
every
that's
action.
that's where I wanted to pull
There
up the
are certain,
etymology of compassion,
yeah, go
just to
ahead.
really look at where it's coming from. And so the word is Latin in origin, um, coming from the word compassio, which means come, so meaning together or with, and passio, meaning suffering. So to suffer with is what compassion means. When we can look at somebody and recognize, wow, you've experienced suffering. I see that you've experienced suffering, and that's influenced your decisions. That's influenced every single thing that's led you to exactly where you are right now. That doesn't mean that I condone what you're doing. That doesn't mean that I'm okay with stealing, being unkind, being whatever, doing horrible things or contributing to crimes against humanity. I'm not saying any of that. But compassion is an active state that we can choose to uh, pull upon within ourselves to recognize, wow, someone is suffering and I can see the humanity in them. And I can sit with that suffering from my lens of understanding what that might have been like.
Right. And beyond that, in the scope of support, right? It's like what we can start to attempt to construct from this
Hmm.
orientation of compassion is true support. Understanding that hurt people allows us to again not condone certain actions and behaviors, but in the wake of somebody eliciting misaligned, harmful behaviors, how can we rise to the occasion as a collective community to help this person change, to elicit new experience, new information that will prevent
Right.
harmful behaviors
And I
from
tend to have this
perpetuating in the
belief or
future.
bias that we are not that we're going about this in a flawed sort of way, that um, instead of approaching how we can help humanity, we by like, I'm trying to figure out how to even phrase this. Instead of instead of trying to help the person in front of us by saying, wow, they're in a homeless shelter, they're doing drugs, they're experiencing X, Y, and Z, how can I change this individual? My belief where I am right now is that that's the incorrect way of doing that, of eliciting change. Exactly. What we can do
Is to attempt to
is
change. Uh-huh.
reflect and yeah, reflect on the society around us and the community, the collective consciousness that surrounds that individual, and asks, why is that revealing itself? Because to me, as I look at the situation, I tend to see that as a symptom of a bigger issue, not that is the autonomous individual issue itself. Does that make sense?
Right. Yes, and yes, I definitely see what you're saying. Like, and specifically, I like where my mind goes as you share that. It's like, okay, like a person that's maybe lived in the same
Hmm.
community for their whole life. But like, if a person is constantly like, let's imagine like an individual in New York that's bouncing off of different people in different like states of consciousness, which it could then be like the whole collective container of the city that is New York, right? And like how that influences. And I would say that on the individual level, there is a very vast spectrum of experience. And so just because we're in a community, like let's say let's imagine we're in like a community of 150 people, and one person in that community has elicited an extreme behavior. Let's say they've murdered someone. Let's go to the most extreme. But let's say that that child
Hmm.
specifically, unknowingly, maybe even to, let's say, even the family grew up with an uncle who had been sexually abusing the child for, let's say, like 8 years. And nobody in the community was aware of it. The family and the parents weren't even aware of it. I would say that that's a very unique thing to one individual experiencing something that's in the shadows
Right. Well, so then
of
and
a
what I mean
community
by that
structure.
too is like
And so the
the environment of that individual, right? So not just the community as in like the
uh-huh.
totality of 150 people, but that individual that was sexually assaulting the, I'm just going to use the word victim here in this case, just in the scenario, the man that ended up doing the murdering.
Uh-huh.
Um, part of his experience of community, right? What would happen to his psychology? Did he know that not everybody in the community knew? Was he unaware? Did he think that everybody was just okay with it? What was going on in his psychology? Because that was also a part of his environment that went to contribute into his psychology.
Right. And so you wouldn't and so you would argue that to not attempt to change that person's inner
No,
environment.
no, I'm not saying that. I'm saying what it seems like is that the focus is on changing that inner environment before we address like, okay, how can we show up as a community, or what is going on in the environment as well. It's not one or the other. It's this, how do we address the internal and also recognize that the external influences as well, right? It's both. It's yeah.
100%. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a helpful reframe for me in
Yeah.
terms of and from that place, I agree. It has to be both, but I would actually, I guess where I differ in just the semantics, maybe we're saying the same thing, but I would actually say for me, there is benefit in trying to elicit change
Hmm.
through exploring how we can create shifts in both the inner and outer environment
Yes.
to make the person feel more whole,
Yes.
feel more loved, feel more connected. So I would like to be a part of eliciting that change for someone. If they're feeling separate and harmed and abused, I would like for them to
100%. But if
experience
that's
something
all
different
that
than
they're
that.
experiencing, and this is where for me I would get a bit stuck, is if we're just focusing on helping that individual and then we're not showing up to address what's going on in the collective, what are the chances that this is going to happen again to somebody else? What are the chances someone else is going to also experience this? And
Right,
so,
right, totally.
yeah, so that there needs to be, pardon?
High,
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I was like,
very high. The chances are high that it's
yeah.
going to continue. Right. And I mean, the thing is like in the realm of psychology, there's many bodies of research. This is very well known. This is like a psychology
Mhm.
101 class around classical conditioning. We will learn that punishment is the least effective route to elicit behavior change. And Yet
Mhm.
it's the number one route that we go down when somebody does something wrong. We punish them by putting them into prison systems in which there is little to no actually rehabilitation support, mentally, emotionally, physically, and key would be spiritually, like, because I feel like that's such a profound piece that is missing across the board. That, I mean, obviously I have the bias running a spiritual retreat center as a living, but I see every day people come and connect with the spirit realm, and that be the thing that they needed
Mhm.
to feel whole, and receive deep healing. So yeah, I mean, really what we see in the system is an orientation towards punishment, towards isolation, towards separation. And we just want to push the ugly things that are a part of all of our human experience to the side, right? We want to see ourselves as separate from that, as completely incapable of that. And that's the really actually confronting piece in this, right? Is to actually really play with this idea, to play with this concept that everyone is doing their best. What we have to admit, our own egos have to admit in being able to actually say a full yes to that, is I'm the same as that murderer. We're equals. The only thing that's different is the way in which the world has shaped us, the set of experiences, right? And from it's so interesting. My mind's like spiraling right now. I'm just like all these little connective threads are weaving, but it's, that's the very thing that led me towards birth. I spent a few weekends with a birth psychologist and walked away from that experience with a belief that the experience that is birth lays a profound imprint upon human consciousness, human psyche for an entire lifetime. And thus, if we change the way babies are born, the way that babies enter this world, we change the entire frequency of humanity. And so, yeah, it's just the nuances, the subtleties of how
I
human
would
consciousness is
love,
shaped
because I agree actually, but I would love to have you go into that a little bit more. Yeah, because I
in
can
terms of
already
birth
hear
shaping human
people
consciousness.
saying, and like in the back of my head, isn't it more important that a baby is alive than the way that they're born?
Right.
Mhm.
I mean, whew, here we go, rabbit hole. Yeah, okay. Well, this is a topic we
Mhm.
were kind of touching on before the call. And something I was contemplating this morning actually is this very thread of what is each mother or family or birth worker's intention when it comes to birth? What is the priority? And I was reflecting upon a story that I know that's in my field, that's in my awareness, and kind of going through just a process of like, at first it started with judgment and then it led really quickly into curiosity. The judgment was like, why are you making those choices? Why are you walking the path in that way? Like, I just couldn't really understand. It was decision making that is very different from how I personally walked, right? So it's a bit confronting. So noticing that, and then once I stepped into the realm of curiosity, my first thought was, okay, but what's driving the decision making? And what I very quickly landed on was, it seems as though this woman and family that I was contemplating carries the only priority as life. The truth of my experience is that I cared
In your
about
birth
more than
experience, you mean?
just life in my birth experience. And don't get me wrong, I absolutely unequivocally cared about life. Of course, I'm a mom. I'm sure there isn't a single mom that will ever listen to these podcast episodes that would say that no matter what choices you made, that wasn't a priority, right? That you didn't care about safety and that you didn't care about life. But very clearly for me, I can name that wasn't my only concern. I wanted life and I wanted it to be sacred. I wanted it to be ceremonial. I wanted it to be undisturbed. And I had very clear reasons for that come from the teachings that I'm going to move to sharing in terms of my understanding, my educational path. I have literally sat at the feet of professors that have walked very, educated lives in the realm of birth and in the realm of psychotherapy, and were presenting information, concepts, ideas to me that very much so resonated, that very much so inspired me, that
Mhm.
ultimately led me to
Right.
leaving my master's program and pursuing birth to that extreme, right? After being on a path of psychotherapy for, at the time, 6 years, I dropped it all and walked away because of how profound that experience was. Specifically, sitting at the feet of a birth psychologist and her presenting this idea that birth matters and that we can change the world, we can change the entire consciousness of humanity by changing the way that babies enter the world. And so,
Yeah, like what
yeah, to
evidence
pivot
supports
into,
that?
I
Because
guess,
again,
that
this
a bit,
I actually agree with you.
this,
And that
right,
that was the foundation of what went into my decision making
right,
too. I'm like, okay, I value life and I'm trying to do the safest thing possible. And living isn't the only priority because I want there to be a quality of life, a high quality of life for my child. And if a
exactly,
physiological undisturbed birth
exactly,
is the way
exactly,
to give my child the highest quality of life in his relationships, in his physical
right,
health, in his microbiome and his gut health, like all of these, his mental health, like every single quality, like I wanted to breastfeed him. I was like, okay, that's going to help his physical health, but it's also going to support his relationships and his ability to connect with people and like all of these other layers, right? And so I'm just curious to hear more this evidence, you know, that yeah, I'm really curious.
right, right. So, yeah. So there's two things that she shared that are coming up for me, is like, I think, two really core, like, impacts for me.
Mhm.
And it's through the realm of story. She was telling story. The second is actually she was talking about research that's happened in the realm of psychotherapy. But so the first is her lived experience working full time as a birth psychologist, okay? And so basically what happened with her is her career path was specifically working with moms and families who had young children anywhere from newborn to around 4 or 5 years of age, who are eliciting some different, like, extreme behaviors and coming into the realm of psychology to explore supporting. And so what she described was babies as small as newborns all the way up to children expressing their birth trauma, basically telling their story through, different modalities depending on age. And so the newborn, it's more of a subtle thing, like really just seeing the way that their body moves, seeing what they're doing. Are they looking for boob,
Mm.
like different tensions in their body, right? That once met, oftentimes there would be a referral to someone like a chiropractor to really support the body in the somatic
Like
experience
and
to just
integrate the birth, I
unravel
guess.
from birth and
Right.
things and integrate the birth. Great word. Great word. And and what they're seeing in that is babies, like, with extreme behavior, such as, let's say, colic. As soon as that was met, things would shift. And this, oh my God, okay, yes, this rocked me. So what she would have moms do with young babies, and now this is something that I offer to my own clients, just as an exercise and as a practice. And I've had beautiful feedback from mothers as well, and it's a very simple and beautiful practice, but profound. And what she would have moms do is speak to the newborn about their birth
From the
from
mother's
their
perspective,
perspective,
from the baby's perspective.
from
Oh,
the baby's perspective. So the mom is speaking in semantics, imagining, basically projecting, but also not fully projecting, because the mom is so connected to her baby, right? And so it would be like, remember this moment in the labor? Like, let's say there was a hospital transfer because waters opened and there was a lot of meconium, right? And depending on, right? There's going to be many different ways that different birth workers and different families will respond to the appearance of something like meconium, depending on the amount as well. But let's say it gets into this like frazzled, we need to transfer, we need to go, and all of a sudden the energy's up and anxiety's moving and things are buzzing, and mom is having her own experience. And postpartum, the natural orientation for moms is going to be to integrate their own experience. Oh, that was really, intense for me. That really threw me off. I was really stressed. Like, I felt contracted. I felt like I wanted to run away, like I wanted to hide. I didn't want to go to the hospital. I was experiencing all of this grief. Like, I really, I wanted to be at home. I wanted to be in my nest, etc. And now she is on the other side of that and she has a colic baby. So in connecting with the baby in this way, you would speak to the baby about that moment and any other moment in the unfolding of the story that the mom intuits as being relevant. And so you would speak to the baby and be like, I know, like, at that moment, mommy's waters broke and we seen that you had been pooping, and that was a sign that you could potentially be in distress. So everybody in the room was really worried about you and really wanted to keep you safe. But that could have been really scary for you. And I can imagine that, you were wondering what was going on, that it was confusing, that all of a sudden the energy shifted. We went from being calm and being in the pool and just being in our process, just me and you, to all of a sudden the energy changed so strongly and everybody in the room was buzzing around. And I can imagine that was confusing, that you maybe didn't know what was happening. And all of a sudden we're leaving our safe space and you can feel mommy's nervous system, tense and unsure and feeling fear. And I can imagine that semantic, right? I can imagine that made you also feel fear. And, just speaking to the story, but attempting to validate their experience. And what this birth psychologist spoke to in terms of the behavior shift she would see in babies was just like, lit me on fire. It just was like, oh my
Well,
God, like babies,
okay, and
they're
pause for
so
just a moment
conscious, they're
here.
so
Two
aware.
things. It's like, one, I am floored. I need to write my birth story from Floyd's perspective. Like, now I'm just like, whoa.
Whoa,
And
I just got
two,
full
we
body
need to
goosebumps.
recognize,
Okay,
and this
yeah.
is not up for debate. Like, come for me in the comments. I don't really care. Babies, babies are intelligent, period. Just because they can't speak or lift their head or move or need help changing does not mean they're stupid. And it doesn't mean that they're not smart. They're making strides actually beyond what I'm doing right now. They're constantly growing. And so I think also just bowing at the feet of babies and recognizing that they are intelligent and they are communicating their birth trauma with us. As they get older, consciously or unconsciously, subconsciously, they are constantly communicating that. We are constantly communicating that. Right. And just recognizing that, because I think there is this idea out there where it's like, well, babies need to learn. They're not smart yet. They need to, and yes, but they are.
Yes, and like
No,
I have two toddlers. They wouldn't survive if I left them alone, I promise you.
100%.
They need
And
100% constant
they are
supervision.
intelligent. They are intelligent.
So intelligent. Like Mike says all of the time. Like he trips out on it. Like cuz so I nannied for like 14 plus years. I've been very intimately connected to
Mhm.
babies and young children for the entirety of my adult life actually. And so interacting with our babies was profound because I'd never interacted with my own child and had that level of intimacy with a child or a baby. But like he is just like, I cannot believe it. He's just like, they're just little people. Like they're so dynamic, their personalities, their preferences, their ability to communicate, their intelligence level. Like they are so smart. And he's like, they're just like our little, they're not babies. He literally says that. He's like, they're not babies, they're little people, because it's such a trip for him, not like coming from the world of not being so intimate with babies and actually coming into the recognition and understanding that they're so conscious and aware and intelligent and present. They're there. It's yeah,
Mm.
it's such a beautiful thread of parenting, you know. And I would say that anybody that's arguing that babies aren't intelligent or conscious or aware
Yeah.
just
And
hasn't
again, that doesn't mean
spent
that they're going to be able to
intimate
sit and
time with a
do,
baby.
long division, but it does mean that like they I mean, even the definition, the ability to acquire and apply knowledge and skills. And babies are constantly learning to do that. There is a constant development, constant growth. It's ongoing. And so to recognize that as humans, we are social, communal creatures by design. And how do we live in community? How do we connect socially? We communicate. And our verbal communication is such a small percentage of how we actually communicate. There's body language, there's energetics, numerous ways that we communicate. So if we can watch our telepathically, yeah, exactly. Astrally, like,
Telepathically.
but like if we can communicate or if we can recognize that our children are always communicating with us in birth, in utero, as infants, and onward, and also recognize that our bodies are communicating with us because our bodies are direct lines of connection to our emotional bodies, to our lived experiences. In many ways, I understand our bodies to be, yeah, a representation of our inner child, or the biology of belief. What we feel, we are, we experience,
Yeah, I see it
yeah.
as like the last layer of expression, you know, like I think that things happen in our energetic bodies and then they ripple down. They ripple into our psyches, then they ripple into our
Yeah, it's the
emotions, and
densest
then,
form. I mean,
you
it's
know, it
from
expresses
from
out
what
through our
we
body.
can perceive. I'm sure there may be other
Exactly.
dense forms that we're unable to perceive, but yeah. Hmm.
Right. 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 And it's so beautiful, you know, it leads me to reflecting on some births and just, you know, observing and witnessing moms and their birth experience and just kind of actually seeing the beauty of that and how, I mean, birth is a very unique opportunity to see that if you are in a physiological undisturbed birth space, because if you can step back to observe a woman birthing, you can actually really see that play out, I find. Like I find that expressing through words is
Mm,
the more uncommon kind of modality. And yet if you are able to quiet yourself enough to observe, there is so much communication. The
hmm.
mom is communicating so much, so much, that I feel like if you are just actually there and observing her, like in many times words aren't needed, you know? And then you have the moms like me who just talk through the whole thing to themselves out loud, you know? I talked to
Hmm.
my baby, God, and myself the whole time I was birthing, you know? But
Hmm.
like, yeah, so there's always the
Totally.
nuance, right, in terms of how different women express and move through birth. But I would say that a theme that I've been able to witness in the birth spaces that I've been in is extremely tangible, nonverbal communication that's happening through the somatics of the body that you can really see like coming down from that the more energetic spiritual realms, which the most of the mom's consciousness is in that realm, you know, during birth. So
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing.
yeah, really interesting, really beautiful. So I feel very curious. Did I finish that thought? And oh no, I
Hmm.
didn't. I'm gonna weave
Okay.
back because there was two things I was gonna say, and then I have a question for you. Um, so I was sharing around,
Mm,
yeah, just like the naming of the story. So the other thing as kids would get older, she would see kids actually like playing out with their toys, their birth traumas, and like things that they needed, and like they'd play like specifically like little girls playing with dolls. You could really see them like enact, and like I'm already seeing it in my 2-year-old, her expressing herself through her dolls. She's 2 years old, 2 years 8 months, 2 years 9 months, and she'll tell me about her doll's experiences. Oh, my doll's tired. My
mm,
doll's sad. My doll is cold. My doll, you know, and she's like, and so I'm like very curious, and like because of even just this teaching, not that I think she's expressing birth trauma because she had a beautiful birth, but to just like ask her questions about that, right? Like, and kind of play her game
Mm,
with her doll and see if she's processing something, if she's trying to communicate something with me through her play. And sometimes she's just generally exploring her world. And we normalize a discussion around emotions in our house quite extensively. And so we're constantly naming emotions. Both Mike and I will name our emotions. Like, I will say, like,
mhm.
mommy's feeling really frustrated right now. Mommy's feeling overwhelmed, like if I get to those edges, that's my practice, is to always name it. And same with them. If they're getting really upset about something, I can see you're really sad. I can see that you're feeling anger. I can still see you're feeling frustration. Do you want a hug? And so one of my win moments as a mother, Sunny was probably right around 2 years, a little over 2 years, and we were going to sleep. And we co-sleep, and I sleep in the middle of the two girls. And that night, Sage was needing a little bit more comforting, and so I had rolled over, and my back was towards Sunny, and I was comforting Sage and putting her to sleep. And Sage and Sunny was like, "Mom, I want you to face me." And I was like, "Sunny, just give mommy a second. I'm gonna help your sister because she's having a hard time, and then I'll roll towards you, okay?" And she was like, "No." And then she was like quiet for a minute, and she goes, "Sunny's
Thank you for
frustrated." And I
communicating,
was like,
articulating
"Oh
that
my
feeling.
God."
Well, and that's the beauty, but that's
She
the
was
beauty of language too, though,
frustrations.
is, while yes,
I
there is
just
so much other communication that's happening, language and being able to articulate is such a powerful tool, because then we can ask questions, we can give a voice to that curiosity, we can give a voice to our judgments, to our bias, to our beliefs, and then we can, have deeper intimacy with those that we're in dialogue with, with those that we're in relationship with.
But like, even just, yeah, like for me it was like this moment of like the level of emotional
Mm.
intelligence, like her ability in that moment to not just act out her frustration, but to name it. I'm like, this my 2-year-old daughter just
Totally.
elicited more
While she's
emotional
feeling it, not
intelligence
even
than the
like in
average
reflection.
house.
Yeah.
It was like, while she's feeling it, exactly. Oh my God, it was so beautiful. It was so, so beautiful. But so then to come back, so like, yeah, seeing that kids will. And so this is a really beautiful thing as parents, that like in terms of a teaching, to just be aware of like, play is not irrelevant. Play is so deeply significant. Children are learning so extensively through their play processes, to the extent that there are indigenous cultures around the world that will leave kids, they will not intervene to educate a single thing until children around 7 to 9 years old, because they understand the wisdom and the significance of the process of play, and how much children are learning and how much they actually need that chapter in their life to be, again, undisturbed. We have a thing for
Yeah.
disturbing, shaking things up, us humans, but yeah,
Yeah.
it can be
You
hard for us
know,
to just kind of
but
leave
it's
things
actually interesting that you're bringing
to
up play, because
to
as you're saying
unfold.
that, like, it's important for children's development and all of these things. I'm like, I like to play. I love to play. And something that was, we need to play, you know? And
Need to play. Like, Mike and I are constantly dying laughing because we're in our bubble. We are
mhm.
very bizarre, extreme, sarcastic. Like, we aren't just like
Yeah.
woo woo spiritual. Like, we get weird for sure. I mean, he's like,
Well,
he
that's
has an inner
me.
gangster that's alive. Putting
That's
on hip
me.
hop 8 a.m. for the babies first thing. Yeah, totally having a dance party.
You know,
Totally.
but
Yeah.
and it's helpful,
Yeah.
Jason and
And it's
I, in
so
the first year
important.
of Floyd, we played chess all like, we could not stop playing chess. We weren't doing well, we were just going, but we were just using this. No, but it was so interesting because then
We
sometimes
were
we'd be
doing
having a
well.
really
Yeah,
difficult
exactly.
conversation, and then halfway through, like, me sharing an emotion, I'm like, "Okay, checkmate," or whatever it might be, and, like, and I didn't say checkmate very often because 'cause I'm not very good, but the idea wasn't to win, right? The idea was just, "Let's play, let's do something, let's have an activity in between us that we can both engage with," you know, and and like acting out our
That's so
experiences and our
interesting.
trauma and our, and it was just really interesting because we played hundreds, if not thousands of games, right? And just like how often did this reflect our emotional states and what was going on and how we were processing things, and it was just whoever invented chess. Like I am in deep reverence to you because that was a medicine, honestly, that saved me. It did, that saved that, yeah.
Right.
Even though I'm not good at it,
Even
because
though you're not
playing
so
isn't
good at
about
it.
being good.
It's interesting.
Playing is about engaging.
Right. But it's so interesting that you bring that up because what it's illuminating for me that I've never made this connection, but after both of my miscarriages, Mike and I sat in bed for weeks and played rummy. So like is there a natural
Hmm.
like whoa, there's something
Yeah.
there. Like I feel like I need to
Well,
maybe
but these are
reflect on it
games
a
of
little bit more
relationship,
before
though.
speaking into it, but like just that normal well, right, there's connection. There is just the simplicity of
Yeah. It's a space to,
like
yeah, and it's a
distraction,
space to
honestly.
drop
It's
in.
just something to
And it's
do.
interesting because when the way that I've understood it is when we're playing games like that, whether it's cards or a board game or whatever it might be, we are engaging with our hands. And energetically, our hands reflect to us the ways in which we meet the world around us, right? It's the first thing, we reach out to the stove and it's hot. And we go, oh, I know what to do here. Or, someone's crying and we put a hand on their shoulder to offer comfort. I noticed when I'm stressed, I'll be laying down. I'm laying in bed, relaxing, and then my hands will be tight. And I look down and I'm like, okay, just what's going on here? When I touch my body and I'm reaching out and I hug someone, our hands are the first thing that meet the world. It is.
So it's moving
Yeah.
energy
And it's
even,
and it's engaging in
it's just a
relationship.
release. It's a let
And
go.
when
It's
when
like
that's happening and connection, yeah, during
for
something
sure
difficult like a
connection, for
stillbirth
sure.
or a miscarriage or trauma, whatever it is, there's a willingness to still engage with the other person, a willingness to still come together. And because there's so many moving pieces, especially with something like
Right.
chess, it's calling all of these different parts back. For me, it felt kind of
Right.
like soul retrieval, where it's like, okay, we're still allowing all
Right.
of these different parts to engage, whether it's
Right.
the knight or the king or the queen or the bishop, like all of these have different personalities because they move on the board differently. And I've got all these different pieces. And being so fractured after a trauma, how can we piece together all of these things and how can they interact with one another?
Wow, yeah, I'm having some epiphanies here. It's very interesting because when I think about the process of playing games, playing card games, playing board games, these types of things, like
Hmm.
for me, it's a very wholesome experience. And it's something that I trace back to childhood, to
Hmm.
family, to sitting around a table during, like, there's a very wholesome, nostalgic energy. And Mike and I go through like little phases as well, even now, not
Hmm.
even from a place of like integrating something that's challenging.
Hmm.
But we like we'll sit and play crib at night. We'll play Skippo. We'll
Yeah.
play whatever games that we like. We go through these little bursts of windows where we'll just him and I every night, like after our babies go to bed, and we'll just sit and play cards or play something. And it's so wholesome.
Me too,
Anytime my family
always.
gets together, that's like the
There's a
main
card
thing
game
that we're
called
doing. Like
Spoons.
is
Have you played that?
right. Well, I think I played it a long, long time ago when I was a
It
kid.
can
When I was
get
like
so
probably like
violent. Yeah,
14 years
yeah,
old, we had
yeah.
it, and
And you want to be
you
like
have to like grab
sneaky
the
and people are
spoons and
jumping
stuff.
across the
Yeah,
table,
yeah, yeah,
but
yeah,
it's so
yeah,
fun
totally.
though.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
so
Yeah,
engaging and
yeah,
fun and
exactly. I
playful. And yes,
remember
there
it.
can be some
It is.
competitiveness,
Yeah,
but like when you leave
yeah.
that game, for the most part, I never remember who wins. I just remember engaging with
You're
someone,
happy, right?
you
Exactly.
know? And it brings me back to like building blocks as a kid or like,
There's an epic game called right. Exactly. Exactly. There's an epic game called Unstable Unicorns. It's a card game that's really fun that my family plays, and it's
Yeah.
got like these little cute unicorn characters, so it's kind of fun as
Skippo's
well to
my
have
favorite.
that.
No, that's
If you
that's
haven't played Skippo,
I'm
that's a very like that
same. No, I
Skippo is
love
like
it.
tradition in my life. Like if my best friend listens to this episode, like we literally played Skippo
I am okay.
for
There's not many games that I'm
days of
actually good
Skippo.
at, but Skippo is like I
Ooh,
yeah,
girl,
I know.
we're gonna have to battle it out when we see each other in person. I think I'm pretty good. Although Mike has
Yeah.
got
No,
good
I'll go on
these
like
days, and this
rolls
little
where I'm
he's been
just like
beating me
going,
lately.
going,
I'm
go
like,
like
Skippo's my thing.
yeah. Oh, it's so good. No, Skippo is
Unstoppable.
such a
Yeah,
it
totally,
like I can feel it in the pit of my
totally.
stomach and like
It is.
even going lower, I'm like, this is my childhood, like the essence of my childhood, like sitting by the fire playing Skippo, like totally. Ceremony,
spiritual
Skip-O's
experience
ceremony.
that is
Yeah,
Skip-O.
totally. No, I love Skip-O. I mean,
Funny.
just, but there's just, it's such a way to, I mean, you learn so much about each other, about people, like the way that they play, or if they want to engage, or if they don't, and just, I mean, even something like Cards Against Humanity, that's where like my inner, like, like my cynic, like darker, shadowy side, love it.
If you want a cynical game, if you want a
Oh,
cynical game, you
oh.
have to play Secret Hitler. This game is it is a wild one. And living here in the valley, it's so interesting because this is just like a
Hmm.
mosh pit of different people from around the world. So like literally we've played this game with
Yeah.
Jewish people. Mostly we actually have quite a few Jewish friends, but also with people with German friends.
Oh
We've
my
had
God.
a game where there's been Jewish and German people playing with it. But it's so interesting. Like
Oh my
there's
God.
like the two sides, the fascists and the liberals, and it's like this game to figure
Right,
out who is Hitler. You like it's kind of like Clue. Like you get a little
right,
pack
right,
of
right.
cards, and you're either a liberal or a fascist, and one of the fascists is
Okay.
also Hitler. And so the whole game is to figure out who's Hitler, and
So okay, so
everyone in the whole game is
I've
basically
played this,
pretending to be
but two different
liberals.
ones, two
And
different
so
versions. One is werewolf. So there's like one werewolf, civilians, all these different things and but it's like it's based in storytelling. And then there's another one that's called
okay, yeah,
like shootout or something. And it's
yeah,
basically there's like a sheriff and renegades and it's like set in the old west or whatever, but similar that yeah.
uh-huh. It sounds similar. It sounds similar. Yeah, yeah. It's so funny. Like I fucking oh, there's my first swear on the podcast. That's something you guys don't all know
Yeah.
about me. I a little bit rogue with the F bombs. But no, it's so funny when Mike ends up getting Hitler and he
Mhm.
like I swear he attracts Hitler, the Hitler card, and his whole energy just implodes. Like he's like sincerely devastated to be Hitler because he just can't hold it. Like every time he gets the card, I'm like across the room, like, hold it in, don't lose it. Like
No, no
it's like I
idea.
have
Oh
no
my
idea who's
God.
Hitler.
I
No
want to play that so
idea.
bad. But this is like, yeah,
It's fun. It's fun. Sidebar.
this was such a big segue.
But
Just
also,
go
you know
and
what this brings up to me is
talk about
like
board games.
is was sidebar. Yeah, exactly. We're here for it. But sidebar, but like also I think like
Mhm.
we're speaking to something profound and relevant as well, which is just the energy of play, and like I feel like for me, it's actually like a measure of who I can be friends with and who I can be close to. Like I need a certain level of playfulness in my dynamics, and I find myself actually encouraging clients often. Like this is a classic conversation I'll bring up when I have clients that are really struggling specifically with anxiety or depression is like practice play. Like you have to bring that frequency back into your life. Like it's such a medicine, it's such a profound force, and it has so much impact on our lives to be able to process some layers of life through play, even kind
Mhm.
of bringing that into even the realm of sarcasm. So I feel like sarcasm, I mean, there's an art
It can
there and
also
it's
be
definitely
that like
subtle, and the
unspoken
pendulum can very quickly swim
thing
swing
too,
too
right?
far,
Like
and
there
it
can
can
be
be
some
right.
mm,
But there's a wisdom in that, like I find like with Mike and I, because we
so
we
do
do
Jason and
orient
I.
towards sarcasm, we can say little things that could be like triggers or like could be like these big conversations, but like, oh hey babe, seen you didn't get the garbage out yesterday. Hey, you gonna like just like to play say it in some like playful, sarcastic way versus
Right.
like to
Hey,
come
this
and be
is bringing
serious of
up a
like, what are
really
you
big
gonna
thing
say?
for me
Like
because,
it just I
having it to
feel
be a
like
whole process when it doesn't always necessarily need to be.
right, exactly. Need to be a big process, right? And so, how can the energy of play impact our life? I mean, it brings me to my birth story, like
Yeah.
in ways like play. Anytime I tell Sunny's birth story, like I feel like I told parts of it to one of my dear sisters who actually
Okay.
lives in Nelson. She just had a baby a couple weeks ago, and I was talking with her on the phone and telling her my birth story, and she was literally in tears crying, like dying laughing. She's like, I literally cannot, that is so funny. So Like even just bringing some movement, some play into birth in moments, can be so beautiful. And
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell my birth stories on the
We want a
podcast at
whole
some
episode for
point. I
that.
think
Yeah.
that'll we'll
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
open
Yeah.
a whole nother thing. Yeah, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
exactly. But yeah, so play
Mm-hmm.
is, yeah, it's a very interesting topic, and I feel curious, just how the lack of play in a lot lot of adults' lives, how that's
So as you're
what the
listening right
impact of
now,
that is,
drop your
and
favorite board
how
game
that
below.
influences behavior.
Yeah.
What do you do to play? So I would love to
Right. You had a question that
kind of
you
pivot,
didn't speak it yet, but
and
I am curious to know
I
what
had
your
a
question is.
question. Yeah. And so let's bring back the topic that we're considering, which is
Mm-hmm.
everybody is doing their best. And so I'm curious what that brings up for you specifically in some of the layers of contemplating
Yeah.
and integrating your
Um,
experience.
yeah. So for those of you that, I mean, maybe this is the first episode you're listening to. Maybe it's not, but I lost my son in childbirth, March 3rd, 2024. My partner and I were planning on doing a free birth, and then we had an emergency transfer to the hospital. We drove there. There was no ambulance at this point, and he was stillborn. And you can listen to my birth story. We have an episode about that. Um, but yeah, ended up being in a coma for a couple of days. Afterwards, on life support, I was dying from super rare blood infection. Yeah, sepsis, organ failure, and and then I received a lot of judgment and criticism. I also received a lot of prayer and a lot of compassion and love. So I don't want to negate that at all. It wasn't just judgment. I received a lot of holding as well. But there were many comments that had come back to me either by through the grapevine, the gossip train, whatever, and then also receiving direct like messages and letters from people um, telling me that I was being selfish, telling me that um, you know I it was my ego. There was one woman that said it was her ego. That's why her baby died. All of these things, and we've talked about ego in the birth space. I think a couple episodes ago, maybe 3 episodes ago, and yeah, it was really bizarre to hold because I knew and I was questioning, but I knew that I did what I thought was safest. And then receiving all of these projections, I went into a deep spiral of questioning for months and months, being, inundated with outside perspectives that, from people that didn't really know me, um, and being forced into, I mean, I guess I wasn't forced into reflection, but I decided to go into a space of reflection. Anytime somebody has an outside opinion of me and saying, "Hey, you impacted my life in this way," I don't know if there's been a circumstance where I haven't taken that and said, where's the truth here? Is there truth here? Um, what is my experience of this? Um, and anyway, recently, I'm being interviewed by a newspaper sharing my story. And so I had to gather all of these bits and pieces of information. And I was looking through old journal entries from when I was pregnant. And uh, and I found some. I'm just gonna look for them right now. Um, but as I was writing in this journal, because I had two journals, this one was just me writing my thoughts and feelings and findings, and I mean, even here, fears and beliefs around pregnancy and birth. And on one column, there's beliefs, and then on the other column, there's fears. And this was an activity that I had found in 10 Moons. It's a book on natural birthing. And it was just to explore your psychology around birth. And then I have like journal entries where I go into this. And then afterwards, after you write your belief and the fear that correlates to the belief, you write an affirmation that is positive that can reframe and retrain the brain. You know, beliefs, bad things happen to me. I won't know how to be a mom. Pregnancy and birth complications are common. I won't be a good mother. Birth is painful. All of these things. The fears here, fear of pain, fear of failure, fear of letting my child down, fear of death, loss, disability, fear of my ability to create, fear of death, loss, fear of pain. All of these things that I ended up actually facing: loss, death, disability. Like,
Right. And what stands out to me in this moment, and this is something that I've experienced in your personality in general, is the depth. I feel like you reflect and contemplate and meet yourself in a really deep and profound way. And I see that as a part of your personality before Floyd's birth and death. And what you just did there, even just that one page in one journal, is more self-reflection than many mothers do around this, their psyche, their fears, their beliefs around birth. Right? And so, like, what stands out to me in this moment is just how much intentionality. This did not
no,
come. This was not a surface layer
no.
choice.
And this is where, yeah, I've got notes in here of, like, giving mother a halo, like all of these things, talking about how the placenta is a fetal organ, like, how to, like, 5 behaviors that contribute to baby's first breath. Like, I have notes on resuscitation and, you know, what a mother, I remember writing this actually. What a mother thinks of during birth makes a difference. Like, all of these things. And then just writing, 13 weeks with baby, and hummingbirds still come to visit me every day. And just writing, oh, yeah, getting into some astrology of what's going on. And may this baby be healthy and well. My writing's really messy here. But yeah, there's still fear of miscarriage. That still arises within me. Fear of losing something, having a hope and a dream let down. I want to find this entry. Right now I'm talking about pregnancy and just how I'm feeling. Feeling guilty that I was so mental in my process. I remember the first trimester, I was just trying to research everything. I was like reading every book and just trying to find all this information that I could. And I was like, wow, like, I really didn't just sit and meditate with baby as much as I wanted to. I was like constantly like in this absorbing of information. And it came from a big fear.
It really, right. But it really, really is clear to me that you were doing your best.
Yeah.
You were showing up with your best, putting all of your energy, all of your care, so much of your time into
And so
reading,
even
researching, writing,
even this,
reflecting,
there's a
planning,
question here that I
processing.
wrote an answer to. What drew me to autonomous physiological free birth? Can I read this? Should I read this? I haven't fully read this yet,
Please,
so I just
please. Yeah, if you feel called, I
like,
mean,
okay.
yeah, I'm here for it. I have goosebumps, so this is really raw and in the moment.
I
Okay,
don't
let's
remember
do
the
it.
first
Yeah,
time I heard about
please.
free birth, but I do remember having a vision of myself birthing outside in nature. I remember being with my ex-partner and fearing that he would want me to have a baby in the hospital, that there was no way, yeah, that there was no other way. My mother gave birth to me at home with 2 midwives, and hearing her story has always felt really good to me. For a long time, for a long time now, I've had baseline distrust in Western medical system for many reasons. All of this leading me to choose free birth. The Business of Being Born documentary was there's a word there that I can't read, something to me. And it validated so much of what I already knew. And for as long as I can remember, I've held an intimate trust in my body. No matter what has come up, I didn't take pharmaceuticals or medication. And there's such a strong belief I have to be able to birth on my own. And now with the knowledge to back me up, I can see that my intuition is calling. My intuitive calling is very accurate. I know it's in my bones that free birthing is my safest and most liberated option. And with some fears of the ego, I still ultimately have unwavering trust in birth and my body. This pregnancy seems to be changing me to my depths. And to be honest, I don't always want to go there. And then this is just going on into some other thing.
I'm curious what comes
Yeah,
up for you as you read.
these are the notes that I wrote when I woke up from a coma. I still had a tube in my throat. I couldn't speak. Well, we can get into that some other time. Yeah, just recognizing that, all these people that said, like, it was your ego, it's your fault, you did this because you were doing something trendy, because you wanted, you wanted this, like, picture perfect birth, where for me, I was like, I don't want to be observed at all. Do not have a camera near me. I don't want to be filmed. Like, I was very um, concerned with being observed, period. Because again, I was informed that being observed can lead to, like, labor stalling and prolonged issues that could cause harm. And I was like, I don't want my baby's first experience to be filmed. That feels so, I feel like that's not appropriate. They're not able to consent to that. I don't want to do that. That doesn't feel okay for me in my journey. But just witnessing my own words written down, saying I had an intuitive impulse to free birth, and everything that I'm saying is confirming that to be the safest thing.
Well, that's the piece that stood out, I would say, the most to me, is like you literally wrote down, it feels like the safest
Yeah,
path. You said something along, it's clear to
yeah,
me. Like, it was so
yeah.
definitive, the semantic and the way it was written. It's so clear to
hmm
me that
And
this is the safest
in
path.
some cases, maybe it is. And in some cases, like mine, it really wasn't. And that's the nuance. That's the middle way. That's you know, and I've got full goosebumps.
That's the nuance, right? Right.
Right.
And I just want to speak that you're not wrong, right? You're not
Right.
wrong that observation impacts outcome. This is
hmm
called wave function collapse in physics. And it's directly the study of the impact of observation. And so wave function collapse, I just looked it up. It refers to the idea that the act of
Totally.
observing a system changes its state. In quantum physics, this is not just metaphorical. Measurement
hmm
literally alters the state of the quantum system. Wave function collapse. A quantum system exists in a superposition of multiple position states. When you observe or measure the system, the wave function collapses to one of the possible outcomes. And
hmm
so that alone, I could read on. But basically it's just, this has been measured extensively in physics. You can look it up on YouTube. They explain it. There's like the wave, and then there's observation and how it impacts. And there's this whole conversation and curiosity around how the observer's bias and expectation of outcome impacts the outcome, which that actually kind of gets into a thread that I'm so deeply interested in when it comes to birth. And this is a very subtle, nuanced layer of birth. But I feel so curious around this topic about how someone's bias and expectation, how their desire impacts the unfolding, right? And where this specifically takes me in my consideration is the ways in which specifically medical personnel, and that can be medicalized midwives as well, but you go through this training with this intention to build skills that can save lives. That's such a beautiful intention. And then you go and you study and you spend a lot of time in the textbooks, and then you're watching videos and you're practicing the maneuvers with your hands, trying to understand with a plastic pelvis, with a baby that's a doll, right? But there's just a certain amount of learning that can't really land until
hmm
you've actually experienced the event in real time. And so we have these medically trained professionals, the ones that are younger in their career and in their path, who actually desire
Right.
to see
Right.
emergencies,
Well, when I was in
to be
hospital,
able to
I
practice
had
skills.
various doctors say,
And that's
"Hey, this person is uh, a student midwife or a student L&D nurse. Like, do you mind if they come in and shadow me for whatever?" And some moments I said, "Yeah, that's okay." Other moments I said, "Absolutely not. I'm too sensitive for that." And so this becomes also, yes, we need to learn by being in those spaces, but I've also heard other stories where, women feel coerced into letting somebody come and view them as an experience, as a guinea pig to learn something further. And so that's also like a topic that we could go into at some other point, but I just wanted to voice that. Yeah.
100%. 100%. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I mean, it's like
Mhm.
that's I feel like it's a big topic that we're exploring, is like what are the valid reasons in which women are making their choices? To bring it back to the topic for today, right? Like to actually land in this perception and this understanding that regardless of the spectrum of decisions different moms are making, right? Like there is a why behind her decision making. There is a story that she could tell you if you just asked her why, right? And why are you choosing this for your birth? Regardless of what
Mhm.
that choice is, the mother
Yeah,
will be able to
exactly.
explain it to you, right? And so we have to come back to that, right? Come back to that human piece of curiosity and compassion and understanding that everyone is doing their best. Everyone is making their decisions based on their perception of what is the safest path, what is the highest aligned path,
And
what
so,
feels
yeah, and I
right.
agree
And
wholeheartedly with that. And there's two threads that I think are important addendums here. One being, can we sit and listen? Because, Sam, you just shared, like, can we ask them questions and hear their story? Because the mother will tell us if you just ask. But can we also listen, recognizing that our projections are also found as a filter in our ears? Projection is not just a visual thing. It's the way in which we hear somebody and hear their story and how we interpret that. And then there's a layer and a thread of accountability and responsibility. And that's something that people kept saying to me is you need to be held accountable, you need to be responsible. And that confused me because these people hadn't spoken to me. They didn't know what I was doing or why anything happened. They just had all of these projections and assumptions and criticisms and decided to throw them towards me. And this is where I'm really doing my best to walk a path where I don't do that, where I show up with compassion and curiosity and ask questions. Because again, when we look at the definitions of what is responsibility, the ability to respond to a situation, what is accountability, the ability to go over details. But I think there's this idea, at least in Western culture, of you need to be held accountable, meaning you need to be behind bars, you need to do time, you need to be punished. Exactly. And as we just spoke
you
about,
need to be punished.
is punishment the correct way? Is it productive at all? Does it make any
Productive.
sense? Or is that also a trauma response? Is somebody's reaction of this person needs to be punished, whether it's trauma with a capital T or a little t, is that a trauma response from their childhood of times that they needed to be
Right.
understood and held and cared for, but instead they were hit or punished or whatever their experiences might have been, you know?
Right. Wow, it's just super interesting, so we had a couple friends over 2 nights ago, and we were kind of navigating this topic of conversation around punishment, around accountability, and around like justice, actually. And it was really interesting because the man of the couple that was over, I'm
Mhm.
not gonna, it's very, very personal details, so I will not share like the details, but I will just share very very vaguely, that he has experienced an extreme event in his life in which somebody that he loved is no longer here by, yeah, it was. And so the circumstances around that are
Sorry,
extreme. They're like kind
is
of
this like
Netflix
a present
documentary kind of
circumstance, or is this like
extreme.
coming from his childhood? Are you talking as an adult? Okay.
Somewhat
We don't
present,
need
no,
any
as an
details. I was just
adult.
curious, like,
Basically,
is this
yeah,
a
yeah, as an
childhood
adult.
thing that like
Yeah, we
formed
won't go into
his entire
details.
personality, or yeah, okay, okay,
No, no,
an
no,
event.
no. As an adult man, there was an event that happened and extreme, and so we were talking about punishment and justice, and
Mm,
when it's productive, when it's relevant, if ever. And I had brought up like this story that I know of, this tribe who basically, as a woman is pregnant, the mom and the dad
mm,
typically are the ones that will download a song that is connected to the child's spirit. And this is a tradition in their tribe. And the orientation is that whenever an extreme event happens or a misaligned behavior happens, they don't punish, they love. And so they put the person in the middle of the circle, and the whole community comes together and sits in circle and sings the song, sings the person's song to them until they have whatever breakdown, whatever let go, whatever expression, whatever healing experience is needed to prevent the continuation of the misaligned behavior. And so essentially moving from the belief that love is going to be more
mhm.
productive in changing behavior than punishment, right? And so I kind of presented this idea, and I didn't actually know like the depth of his story. And in that moment, he's like, "Okay, yes, and here's the truth of my experience." And in the wake of that, I'm not interested in forgiveness. I want that person in prison. Period. End of conversation. Forever. Right? And so then we were like kind of, and so to again speak from the influence of experience and how important that is, how deeply experience it impacts our human consciousness, our belief systems, our orientations in life, right? Like it's so extreme. And so like that led me to hit pause of like, I cannot in any way, shape, or form relate to your experience. And it's likely that if I were in that experience, I would feel the exact same way,
And I
actually.
mean, just because I want to offer this nuance too, because while it may be true that yes, maybe this person should be behind bars. I don't know any details, so I'm not speaking from any level of anything. But then
Right,
also,
right,
what is the quality of prison that we have?
right,
Are people that are incarcerated receiving care? Because
right.
while yes, somebody can be behind bars, is there something we can do with with their psychology? Can they receive like really intense, therapy and rehabilitation in some way?
Right,
That can that also be can
right,
there be
right,
space for that to also be true? Okay, I'm not surprised
right. And
that
that
you
was my
did.
question. I actually presented that question. I was like, so it
Yeah.
where's my turn it down a notch
Yeah.
switch? It's lost. I can't
It's
find
okay,
it
you
anywhere.
presented the question.
So I presented the question, if you had the opportunity and you could know 100% that this person could go down a path of rehabilitation and healing and never perpetuate that behavior upon somebody else, would you
And
want
I don't
that?
mean
And for
rehabilitation
him, it
as
was
in
still
you
like
leave
that's just not where he's
prison
at.
necessarily.
And
That's not necessarily what I mean.
right,
Right.
right, right. And I think that would be a different nuance, right? Like I think
Okay.
like that would be the point, is like this person should never be walking free. And like and still there, I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't know, right? I
Yeah.
can't relate to that severity of experience, and thus like likely I would be again,
Sure, of
I
course.
do assume that I would feel the same, actually, in the same set of experiences. And also like there's kind of like this division in my processing of that. It's like, oh, I get that. I can totally see that and like that's fair and that's valid and it just makes sense. And I would probably be in the exact same situation. But because I haven't experienced that personally, I simultaneously have a curiosity of but wait, can we shift the way that we are responding to situations like this that would be better for everyone involved,
Right.
including the person
Right.
perpetuating
Because I mean,
harm?
well, no, because I want to tread lightly. I don't know anything about this story, but there is, you know, I go into these questions too of, okay, so an individual really feels like this person needs to be behind bars. Like I understand that that could be um, a huge reality that I would probably feel the same. And what also went into the psychology to feel with such certainty that that would create some form of resolution, and this is just, I'm not saying that, I'm just posing a question, not even desiring an answer, but these are just things that I ask myself. Prison, yeah.
You mean like prison? Yeah, like you mean like punishment in prison.
Yeah, well,
What is that?
if
What is
there's
it
a
solving,
level of
kind of?
certainty, like this person should be behind bars and never leave, while I can't agree or
Uh-huh.
disagree because I don't know any, like, I can't have an opinion on something that I don't know. But then my inquiry would
Right,
be,
right.
from a psychological perspective, did this individual that feels this way, so this man that you're referring to, what was his upbringing when it comes to punishment? Was punishment always the way that things were resolved? So, what is that level of certainty there? Because there is so much conditioning to affirm that is the way that
Right.
resolution will best be served. Exactly. And
That's
and
how
in
you
extreme
respond when somebody
cases,
does something.
from how I understand psychology, is we resort to those fundamental things because that's our foundation. That's how we land, if I'm not mistaken, right? So these are just things that I'm like pondering,
And then I
Yeah,
think there's
yeah,
just like the
yeah,
human orient
yeah.
contemplating. Of
Right.
course, right, of course. I mean, that's what we're
Yeah,
here to do
yeah.
is ponder. Yeah, but like then yeah, I also feel curious around um just how we perpetuate certain behaviors and frequencies based
Mm,
on what is familiar or like what patterns we create, right? Because it's like systematically like we create patterns in terms of response, and it's like these kind of unspoken rules that everyone orients towards. And I think that there is a validity around a human consideration around justice. I think that that's like we do contemplate fairness, we do contemplate balance, we do contemplate justice. Right? And so there is also just that piece of like, it's not about helping this person. They screwed up
right. Well, and
and
sometimes
thus have a price to pay for that. And the price to pay that we've normalized is
in
time,
confinement,
and
yeah.
energy
Well, and so
spent
this is also where I
in
think the
isolation,
question of,
really.
like, was this thing intentionally done? Was harm intended with actions, or were there things like, I struggled a lot with blame and guilt, and my therapist said, Emma, I have um, I have another client, patient, what, I forget the word that she used, um, and she lost her 2-year-old. She turned her back for 5 minutes. Her 2-year-old was in the bathtub and ended up drowning, and she just ran quickly to grab her phone and came back, gone for 2 minutes, 3 minutes. Do you blame her? And I was stunned that she asked me that. I was like, how can you ask me if I would blame this woman? Of course I wouldn't. What are you talking about? And she's like, but you're blaming yourself, you know, 100%. How do you
And I
not?
bet you that mother's blamed
How do you
herself
not?
as well.
That is the human condition, to blame yourself as a parent when anything happens,
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, you're
Because you're the
constantly
one that is
going
the
you're
most
constantly
responsible.
going
You're the one that
over
cares the
things
most.
like, "Oh, I should
I've
have done
literally
this. Oh,
had the
maybe I
thought
couldn't have raised my voice
myself.
here. Oh, I shouldn't have this." Or, "Oh, what could have happened if the gate was open and whatever, There's so many circumstances. It could have just as easily not happened.
Right. Right. Exactly. Yeah, at our old house, we moved last August, so September. At our old house, it was right along this main road where there's these vans called collectivos here in the valley that run through the valley, and they get paid based on trip. And so they race through the valley, they race everywhere they're going, and it's just super dangerous. And they used to just fly by our house. In our old house, it was like a gate and the road. I'm not kidding you? Like the amount of times in a day that I neurotically checked because our gate like
Mhm,
kind of needed to be like lifted up in order to like latch properly. And so people, we had a very like transient home. People would come in and out of our house regularly, you know? So like probably 10 times a day I was neurotically looking through the window as the gate closes, the gate closed because of, you know, our back door was often open for the girls to be able to play outside or whatever, for Aya to be able to come in and out. And yeah, it was just, it was so in the forefront of my awareness, you know. And like I had multiple processes. I'm like, yeah, I check it 10 times a day, but like that's irrelevant because if there
mhm,
could just be a 30-minute, a 2-minute window, for crying out loud, where, you know, and like I miss that and I don't check it then. And it's just like this is like a process as a parent, and I'm sure any parent listening can relate to
mhm.
how heavy the responsibility of parenting actually can be, specifically in the direction of
Yeah,
like keeping them
absolutely.
alive. You know, it's just like, and I've had that thought even with my phone, you know, like of like I can see myself get distracted. And if I'm like in the middle of a message and then all of a sudden the babies are like, and I just want to focus for a second and get the message sent so I can set my phone down and be present, then they're crawling on me. Like I'm like, ah, like I just need a second, you know, and I want that second to focus. But what if that second to focus, you know, is as human as that is, like it's not like, it's not even remotely realistic to think that we can just drop life and just stare at our babies 24/7. And yet, in the wake of one moment of lapse of focus or present, the reality is that something
And
can
and
happen.
things
And
do.
if it does, again, we're
Yeah,
going to spiral down that blame, shame, guilt. And things do, and they will. And it's such a paradoxical,
yeah,
existential
yeah.
ugh, thing to hold as a parent, right? Because it's like we have to have compassion and grace with ourselves and like recognize that there are other moving parts
And
to
we do
life.
not have the privilege to know the destiny of
And
another being. Fuck, man, that one just gets me every time.
we don't have. I say
We
that
can
quote
apply that. I
so
do apply that to
much.
every single fucking moment. Anytime I step on something, no, I went and was like walking in the forest the other day and I stepped on like a little tree that was growing and it broke. And I was like, "Oh my God, I don't have the privilege to know the destiny of another being. Oh my God, oh my God." And I was like in a process. And it was just like a little sap. It wasn't like a big thing, but I felt so distraught over it. Like,
Right,
but we can apply this to everything.
right.
We really can, and recognizing that while we
No, we
don't have the
can.
privilege to know the destiny of another being, we can never know the entirety of what somebody's journey has been. Whether they do something in our eyes that is completely horrendous, or they made the
Right.
biggest mistake ever, or they do something that we absolutely would do. And so we agree with everything that they say. Like there are so yeah, there's so many layers. I mean, and coming from somebody that's received people saying like you should be in jail, you should be behind bars, you're a murderer, all these things. And then looking back at my journal and seeing, everything that I wrote, and even writing to my son here, like telling him that my brother died and he was stillborn when I was 10. And it was one of the first real heartaches I ever experienced. And that I'm just trying my best to heal so I don't project my suffering and pain onto him, because I don't want to be overly protective, or, in a way that causes harm. I don't want to cause him harm in any way. And yeah, and just having that be at the forefront of my mind the entire pregnancy, of recognizing like, okay, I don't want to make a decision in birth or motherhood based on my own trauma, my own shit, and put that on him, because that doesn't feel fair. At the same time, if we're coming from a perspective of our babies choose us, the souls of our babies choose us, he knew. He already knew. He knew who he was choosing. He knew I can be a pain in the ass sometimes. And he knows now. But he also knew my trauma.
He
Yeah.
knew the choice you were going to make
Even
when it
that
came to
feels like it's
birth.
it's so difficult to even Like because I go through waves of like, is that not just spiritual bypassing? Am I not just feeling that or saying that to make myself feel better, you know? But yeah, maybe. And maybe not.
Maybe. With certain things, with certain things, there's just
Right.
there's no way to know, right? Like this is like a specific realm of rhetoric that resonates and feels true to some women and mothers in terms of having very tangible spiritual experiences with their babies when before they're in utero, before in utero, and like this whole like these rhetorics between it's chosen, but like I don't know. I think that the fabrics of our spiritual nature, and this is belief, right? Again, so like again, we can just recognize and name that these are
Right.
certain beliefs with which
Yeah.
we move from. Like I definitely resonate with this teaching, with this idea that it's not a coincidence. It's not just random. The the babies
Mm,
that come through us, like I absolutely believe that there is past connection and that there's divinity and perfection in that, like that, yeah, that our
yeah,
babies are made
absolutely.
for us, and yeah, that's just belief. That's just belief. That's just bias. It is. There's not really much more than that, but from contemplating
Hmm.
and exploring human nature, really, it then the next question becomes, okay, well, how does
Right.
that belief influence both of our decision making or the way that we show up to life? And so I mean the listen, like the it's interesting that you brought up spiritual bypassing because I was thinking about it
Hmm.
in other kind of moments in this conversation, and like
Yeah.
what's the line there, where is it spiritual bypassing? And I think it's an important thing to be contemplating.
The
Also, I think
definition.
maybe important for
Yeah.
listeners.
Well, and so as you're finding that definition, I also
Yeah.
just want to share like, I have these two pages from my day planner when I was pregnant. Um, and on the 23rd, so 6 days before I went into labor, I decided to pull some cards, and it was a reading that was dreadful. And I was like, I remember shaking and panicking and being like, oh my God, are we making the right decision? What's going on? And I just wrote here, like, I remember being like, okay, what's coming up? Let myself feel that. Let's try to explore where that's coming from and then reframe it. Like, really kept trying to reframe it. So I have a quote, like, quote, good things happen to me. Blessings are my birthright. I'm allowed to receive and have good experiences. There are big emotions about loss, fear of baby being okay. And that's the day that Jason went for a walk. I told him about it. He said, don't worry, I just went on a walk. The trees said everything is as it should be. Don't worry. It's okay. It's fine. We're making the right decision. Meanwhile, I'm having this like panic over, oh my God, is my baby going to die? And yeah,
But the
yeah,
semantic there is very specific. Everything is as it should be.
no, yeah.
Not everything's going to be okay, Emma.
Everything is as it should be. And those
Everything
were
is
the
as it should
exact
be.
words he said. Yeah, exactly.
It's very specific. Right, because I have a very interesting parallel, like, and so I feel so
Yeah,
curious around the
yeah.
orientation towards the specific semantics that come through and like the significance of semantics. Because I had a parallel experience where I was influenced by a midwife in the community who, momentarily saw me and was projecting fear narratives into my field and actually said the words, I think if you need an ultrasound because I think your baby could die.
Oh,
Like I
God.
literally had a person say that to me in my pregnancy, and I walked out stunned that she had the capacity because I'm also a birth worker. So for me, I'm just like, she just crossed a line, Not only am I integrating, this is my first, yeah. I was 27 weeks. I went in to see a midwife here in the valley with the sole intention of asking for her support with paperwork because there's a whole dynamic around that when you birth at home. And I had heard that she had supported other free birthing moms with paperwork. So I went to ask her about that. She proceeded to interrogate me for 3 hours, surprised with my ability to answer all of the questions. And she would make little passive aggressive comments of like, wow, you know some things, or wow, you're very brave. These
Infantilizing
types
is what it
of
sounds like.
things. And then, yeah, at 27 weeks, oh my God, 27 weeks, she put her hands on me. I gave consent for her to map my belly. She couldn't find baby's position. My daughter was breech, so, and also 27 weeks, so she's small, like it's not, it can be also within the realm of normality to not
Mhm.
be able to actually fully determine a baby's position with hands alone at 27 weeks. Um, and I also knew that. I also at the time let her use a Doppler, which I have some regret around, but whatever, we listened to baby's heartbeat. And then she started this whole thing that because she could not determine the baby's position with her hands, that we needed to have an ultrasound. This whole rhetoric came in around she thinks my baby is too small, and that if my baby's too small, then it could die. And so, yeah, I walked out kind of stunned. The next morning, I woke up, I got out of bed before Mike did. I went and sat under the mountains next to the river and just went into meditation, listened to the water, and like said a prayer to a specific mountain. Was like, I like, give me a sign, like I need to,
Mhm.
like I need to know what's going on here, like from the inside out, not from the outside in. And I just dropped in clear, like the clearest of clear, like, no, my baby is going to be okay, was the semantic, which is like a very, like, just like that subtle difference of like he went out to nature and connected
Yeah.
with nature and came back, everything is as it should be. And I feel like that's very like real and true, like in ways, of
Yeah,
course, like there's always going to be the human
totally.
part of you as a mother that
But
just
like,
wants your baby back and wants your baby in
but
your
I mean,
arms. And that is so real and true and valid.
even my
But
friend,
the
she has a journal
medicine of
entry
his
where she
path.
birthed a baby boy. She knew she was having a girl intuitively. She birthed, like, in this dream, she birthed a baby boy and her baby boy died. And she's like, why did this happen? And in the dream, she just knew, like, I just have to let this happen. This is his path. This is my path. But she woke up being like, this isn't my baby. What's going on? And she sent me this journal entry like months and months and months later after Floyd died. And even just that, even just knowing that my lineage carries but even just knowing that my lineage
Oh,
carries
wow, that
child
gives me
loss,
chills.
but not just child loss, the loss of a son with two
Right.
children to be born afterwards. I've been seeing double everything. Two hummingbirds. A friend gave me a mug, two hummingbirds on it. Only two. When Floyd was born, three. I saw two rainbows yesterday. He also comes to me in rainbows. So, but even these subtleties, you can sense my personality. You can sense Sam's personality a little bit. There's obviously like a grounding in a spiritual nature. There's an essence of mysticism that informs our decision making, that informs how we receive and interpret information here, right? And so this is where I'm inviting this definition of spiritual bypassing if you have it. If you pulled it up.
Yes, yes. Spiritual bypassing is a term coined by psychologist John Wellwood in the early 1980s, which refers to the use of spiritual beliefs or practices to avoid dealing with painful, emotional, unresolved wounds,
Right.
psychological issues, or
And
uncomfortable
so
aspects of reality.
there's a very fine line with what that could be. And for me, this is a concept that I'm constantly asking. Am I spiritually bypassing here? Is my spirituality enhancing an experience, allowing for more depth of an experience, or is it an act of avoidance? And really being honest and integral with the truth of what I am being presented with, what I'm holding in front of me. Mhm.
It's such a nuanced thing, spiritual bypassing, no? Because the reality and the paradox actually is that there are certain spiritual teachings and concepts that can support us in the integration and digestion of the emotional psychological content. And so it's not about, it's here's the nuance that I see, is that the same spiritual teaching or concept can be worked with in two different people or multiple different people's inner worlds in very different ways. And it's really hard from the outside looking in to really actually be able to know, label, or understand
Mm-hmm.
the way in which somebody is working with it. Sometimes it can be really clear. Like you can really tangibly see somebody avoiding, or you can really tangibly see somebody going to the depth of it, right? Um, but it's such a subtle, nuanced thing that I don't actually know that we can fully understand what's going on inside of someone in their relating to
Right, exactly. Well, and this
different
is
spiritual
also where, like,
teachings.
you and me as an example, you've sat with me as I've processed all of this very deeply. And we've shared a lot of intimate space where I haven't shared that kind of space with many other people. So you've seen a lot of the inner workings of my mind, of the questions that I've asked myself, of how I've shown up, of the depth at which I'm contemplating every single layer I'm aware of, you know? And so it is interesting, this coming back to this main topic here of, like, everyone is doing their best, whether they have the tools or they don't. Doing your best doesn't mean showing up the way that somebody else would in every single moment, but I do reflect on this balance of compassion simultaneously holding responsibility and accountability. And I think of this, and I'm in the process of writing a Substack article about this, actually. Um, but it's this concept, this phrasing of the best time to plant a tree is 30 years ago. The next best time is today. And what I propose in this article is, if I could go back in time and change my course of action and save my son's life, I would do it in a heartbeat. I would go back and change anything that I could to save his life. I would give my own life to ensure that he survived. However, if I had a time machine, there is no guarantee with certainty that if I went to the hospital even before I was in labor, that he would survive, that something else wouldn't happen. There's no guarantees. Also, I'm not a mathematician or a scientist. I don't know how to build a time machine. I don't have those skills to actually put together a machine and go back. I can't do that. What I do have, right, okay, fair enough,
I don't
fair
think
enough.
most mathematicians or scientists do either.
That's true. But, like, what I do have is a story. What I do have is an ability to articulate that story. What I do have is an ability to plant a tree now that will eventually grow and produce shade for other mothers and babies to find solace in. I will be able to plant a tree now in these conversations that we're having, in other work that I'm doing, that may produce fruit that can benefit other people, even knowing that I will not be able to sit with my son leaning against that trunk under the branches and the leaves of that tree. I can't plant a tree 30 years ago, but I can plant a tree today in hopes that it makes a difference for someone else, right?
What's coming up, right? And what you carry is the unique medicine, gift, and blessing of being the conduit of Floyd's spirit. Like it's through you and through your allowance, through your expression, through the way in which you're showing up to this experience. It's through you that the story moves. It's through you that Floyd continues to impact the physical
And
world.
I just want to be very clear in saying that I'm not special. I'm not more
You're
special
not,
than
you're special.
anybody else.
You're not more special.
I share this quote of the tree. I share Floyd's story. We're having these conversations now because this is bigger than us. This is bigger than Sam. It's bigger than me. It's bigger than her girls. It's bigger than Floyd. It's bigger than our partner. It's bigger, I would go so far as to say, than birth. This is a human thing that we're talking about here, and if we can show up with compassion, yes, to birth, but to one another, to things that we will never hope to understand because we'll never have all the details. We can't, like, it's just, we can't. We're finite, like we have at least a finite physical expression, right? We're human beings. We're not God. So can we still try to activate that within us, that compassion, that implicit compassion, knowing that everybody is trying to do their best. And sometimes we can do our very best, we can do all the right things, and shit still goes wrong. We can try to say the right thing and we still say the wrong thing, and honor that layer of accountability, honor that layer of responsibility. But how do we get to accountability and responsibility? Am I able to look at somebody and say they need to be accountable in this way and have that be true? Like I had people, again, to go back to that point, telling me you need to be held accountable, you need to be responsible. And my question back to them was, what do you mean by that? What do you want me to do? And why is it that you're the person that can dictate what that looks like? Not from a place of aggressiveness or defensiveness, but from a place of genuine curiosity. How do we approach this as humans in relationship, in community, as individuals? How do we show up to that? And I'm not here with an answer. I'm not asking these questions being like, oh, and this is the answer. I'm saying I
Right.
don't actually fucking
No,
know.
I know, like,
These
yeah, right. Yeah. Even as you ask the question, like, I feel like I'm like, whoof, like when I really just like receive the questions that you present, I'm like, yeah, it like produces a bit of like anxiety in me. I'm like, wow, there's just so much depth and so much nuance to this human experience. And like, it's just humbling. Like, I feel like when you really sit with the spectrum of it all, you can't be anything but humbled. Like, it's just the nuance and the paradox is just a lot to hold. Paradox specifically, right? And like, the more that I contemplate existence, the more I just see how our entire reality is rooted in paradox in so many ways. And like, if that is truth, then like, it's always going to be
Mm,
the vehicle of nuance that kind of drives paradox. That's like, we can have this concrete, like, this is the way something is. And then somebody who's really sat and contemplated, it's like, brings in the, but what about
well,
this
I mean, and
situation? And
I think
it
about
all
that
falls
paradox
apart,
with Floyd's
It's
passing, because even
like,
as I was talking, in the back of my mind, I'm like, okay, but Emma, if he didn't die, you wouldn't be sitting here right now. Like, maybe he would have lived, but how many other babies might pass away, or how many women might not be seen or understood, or like, what about that? Maybe did he die so that a million other people could
that is,
experience some kind
yes.
of awakening? Like, and we'll never know, but I can feel like,
We'll never know. But like, wow, that was coming up for me so strong as you were speaking before. Is like actually, so like then through this whole conversation, it's like we come back to, okay, well, we're interpersonal beings, right? And so if we're talking about specifically two things driving choice and decision making, specifically experience and information, what are people experiencing as they listen to these conversations? What is there new information, ideas, concepts to contemplate that might be driving some expression of change? Maybe,
mhm,
maybe not. We don't know, right? We're just putting it out there. But likely. And that's where, like, I feel so confident or so passionate about communication and conversation is because both of those things are alive. We can experience something tangibly through the integration of a story, right? Like, storytelling is such an ancient, sacred technology, if not the most, when it comes to our humanness. And storytelling, the reason we use story and not just typically like, here's the facts, is because we have emotional response to story. And emotions impact our physiology. We can feel our emotions physically. And so a story can bridge that gap of experience. We can start to experience an emotion, experience something physically, psychologically, emotionally in the
Right.
wake of a story, right? And
And I
so,
think if
and
a
then the piece of
story
information and
elicits
concepts and
such a big
contemplation.
emotional response that we do not want to have, we will avoid hearing the story and the truth that is latent within that story. And instead of listening to the, beginning, middle, and end of what somebody is sharing, we'll create a judgment. We'll create a projection and we'll say, oh no, this is their wrong, they're bad. I don't want to hear the story.
Right.
I don't want to hear it because I've already made a decision. Because to feel it, to let it in, hurt. It can be very confronting. It can be very painful.
Quite confronting,
And
right?
it can put into question everything, our entire reality. And if you've ever questioned your
Right.
reality on psychedelics or not, I've done both. And it's freaky to not know
Right.
what's real. It's terrifying, you know? Yeah.
It is. It's hard.
But it's
It is
amazing.
hard. Mid retreat, we're holding people every single round of like, I don't know if I can do this.
Mm,
I don't know if I can do
mm,
another ceremony. This is so intense. It's so hard. What's intense and hard is meeting
mm,
themselves.
mhm.
Meeting themselves, right? It's like we can take a pill and suppress certain things and maybe, create enough of a veil over the truth of our inner world to be able to go through the motions and look like we're functioning in society. And that, and it's also the challenge and the difficulty and the discomfort in meeting ourselves. Also, the fact that that takes a lot more time and space and energy. Those things are the very reason why we orient towards
Yeah.
the band-aid
Yeah.
versus the true fix.
Yeah, totally.
And we can have all the compassion
Yeah.
and understanding for that too, right?
It is. I mean, and
It's a very
before
specific
we hit
thing to
record, I was sharing with Sam that um, yesterday I was going into some 9/11 documentary stuff. And I've gone the conspiracy route, in depth and
right,
and
right,
I've,
right.
I was alive when that happened. I remember I was in school and then I was taken out of school and like I remember the events of that day. But the documentary that I decided to watch actually um, was about people's last words, the phone calls that they made, the people they chose to call, and it was all, "Hey, mom, I just want you to know that there's smoke everywhere, but I don't know if I'm going to make it out, and I love you. Tell my husband, tell my kids." What it was always just love, and like I have goosebumps because I was just watching this documentary and watching these people re-listen to those voicemails that were left. And, this is however many years passed, this is, I don't know when this was recorded, but it was at least 10 years after, September 11th, 2001. And I was just crying with these families because of the stories that they were telling. I know all of the details and the specifics of, maybe not all, but like, 2 planes hit, Tower 2 went down, Tower 3 went down, like this number of people, these casualties, this, like I've heard of all of these things. But to really just sit with the stories and the hearts of people and being willing to listen to that grief, it did something in here. It did something really beautiful in here. And again, I'm like, why did I want to watch this? Like I searched for it. Like I had no reason. It's not September at the time of this recording. Like I have no reason to want to watch it. I'm not getting on a plane anytime soon. Like, but there was just something to really witness other people's humanity and suffering and feel their humanness when the world wants to find out reasons why, when the world wants to move on, when the world wants to have a conspiracy and, say, oh, well, this didn't actually happen, or it wasn't planes, or it was this. Does that even matter? I mean, and there's a space for it to matter, but also, what about humans and our stories? Right. And can
The
we
depth
allow
of our
that to deepen our
experience.
compassion,
And
our levels of compassion, right?
but also the human orientation that we can understand people are doing their best
Mm,
in wanting to avoid
mm,
going there because it's scary, and it's confronting and it's hard and it involves anger and it involves sadness and it involves confusion and just things that you can't make sense of, and it's really confronting. And so it's actually in many times easier to orient towards the facts and try to figure out what happened, what
Right.
went wrong, and who we can blame and how we can bring that into the world of birth. The avoidance of the conversation around death, the orientation towards the scientific medical system wanting to figure it all out, to have the answers in that one pathway that can guarantee no baby will die, but no matter how hard we try, no matter how much research, no matter how much we do, babies still die, and God, that's confronting. And here we are in this, what
Totally.
I would call quite a mess of a birth world currently, where there's polarity, there's separation, there's a lot of judgment, there's a lot of fingers pointed. There's not a connected, wholesome
Hmm.
care model that has full spectrum options that families can choose to construct their births the way that they want. It's interfacing with all of these ideas, projections, fears, unsolicited advice, stories,
Yeah.
all like it's just
Well, and if
there's so
yeah,
many,
and if you have
and it's all human
experiences
nature.
that
We're all doing our
prove that
best.
confirmation bias, that hospitals are always saving lives, that if you had just gone to the hospital, things would be better because this happened to my brother, or this happened to my mother, or this happened to my sister, or this happened to whatever it is, then of course you're going to move towards a perspective of judgment when you hear a story like mine or maybe somebody else's that could be similar. Um, but I think this is what we're proposing. Correct me if I'm wrong, but just can we pause for a moment when we hear something that is confronting? Can we just pause and reflect? What is this bringing up for me? What projections are here? What judgments are here? Can I allow them to be here? Make space for them to be here. Breathe into them a little bit without throwing them at anybody, but instead choosing to show up constructively to a conversation like this. You know, I'm not ever like going to push somebody away for wanting to sit down and discuss birth, even if they disagree with me or think negatively of me. Come and sit. Let's discuss things with compassion, with grace, with directness, you know, but let's articulate what it is that's coming up for us, recognizing that we are both just trying to do our best, and that's going to look different. And can that be okay?
It's leading me to this contemplation around story and how it's received, and just how it's received in different places in different ways. I'm thinking about two specific points that kind of are paradoxes, of course. One being the scientific model, and within the spectrum of the scientific model, story is called anecdotal. It's so individual story is anecdotal evidence
Discredited.
and is oftentimes refuted. So if a research discredited, if a research article is performed and it comes to this conclusion based on different variables, different controls. Oftentimes we want a control group and then we want it peer reviewed, and there's this whole scientific process when it comes towards research. You can go through this whole scientific process and then have 30 stories come and say, well, my experience
Mm.
debunks this truth that you just determined. And science will just say, no, that's anecdotal evidence and it is invalid. So there's an interesting thing there. But then the paradox there in terms of like how that could be valid, right? Like there's questioning there. There is obviously some validity to stories. However, what we also have to consider is how
Mm.
each person is integrating their story and understanding that every experience that they've ever had that's come before that experience is influencing the way in which they're integrating the story and determining truth. And so it's filtered through bias, the bias of the person. And that's why the scientific model would refute it,
So
even though there could be validity to
so then I've
refute
got a question
the truth that the
about
scientific
that
model
because
found.
and
And
that about
also,
like control
yeah,
groups specifically, and I don't know if you'll have an answer for me, but when a scientific study is happening and there are control groups. I guess point blank, I don't understand why control groups exist because we don't live in a vacuum. We don't live in a sterile environment where circumstances are controlled. And so I'm wondering why is that the scientific model
Right.
when
So
that's
in the
not what happens, but anecdotal
right.
evidence is surrounded by circumstance that is real life. And I'm not with judgment to the scientific community, but I'm just, yeah, I'm like, but
Right.
why? If that's not real,
Just out of
how are we
curiosity.
getting
Yeah.
any truth in there?
Right. Well, in the scientific process, there's actually like you want to account for as many compounding variables as possible. And so when you're in the process of creating a research study, there's actually like a process of leaning towards naming
Mm,
other variables that could be influencing things. And so and so as much as you can in the construction of basically the structure of the research, you want to mitigate as many external variables as possible. And so part of the process of actually create, to my understanding, I've done only a few research classes and studying
mm,
psychotherapy, and so it's not like I'm a research expert, but I have studied a bit, right? But so yeah, to my understanding, it is that the process, and that there's studies that are more accountable based on the level of that process that happens, right? So like the more you can see the researcher or researchers accounting for as many as possible
mm.
external variables that could be influencing outcome. And so that's why they try to put it in an echo chamber. But like your point is
Right.
also valid, right? Because life doesn't exist in an echo chamber. And so, right? But like it's like I don't know, like there's one like and then in the space of story, there's one story that's in my field that I'm gonna very, very, very vaguely speak to, without detail, just to yeah, just out of confidentiality. But there is one person that I'm aware of that integrated a birth experience in a specific way that like she concretely came out of the story, her experience of like this is what happened and this is true. And to my awareness, every single thing that I've studied about anatomy and physiology of birth, of physiological birth, and I've talked to many midwives, like, is what
Right.
this mom's saying happened? Is it possible? And across the board, I've received a no. It's not possible. It's not physiological possible. That did not happen. This story is incorrect. And that was my intuition around it. That was reinforced by
Hmm.
my studying. That was reinforced by talking to other professionals. And so then it's like, what's the line, right? And
Right.
that's why anecdotal
Right.
like evidence is so faulty, is because the even the emotional influence, the story in this situation, I perceive the mother very much so emotionally, psychologically
Right.
needing
Right.
her
Well, and this
story to be
brings me to
true in
like a
order to
quote
cope.
that this woman that's doing this interview with me for this global newspaper, talking about free birth. And she was just asking, hey, like, do you have any records just to corroborate your story, basically, just to show like, okay, you got discharged on this day, like you, and not to publish anything, but just to if she's putting this out, she wants to make sure that the details are accurate. And she just says, it's just very common that truthful people get details wrong, period. And that I think is the case with most things. And just like I'm thinking even like our peripheral vision, like our vision will make up stuff that isn't there. And I'm not exactly sure why the brain does this, but we do this in all these other circumstances. We make up details, we fill in the gap, you know? That's how the brain works, I think.
Right. And so it comes
Mhm.
back to the complexities of human nature, and maybe we can just all believe that we're all doing our best.
Yeah. And
Because it
if
is
we
a
don't,
messy,
can we just like
confusing
show
ride,
up and be
people.
like, "Hey, what the fuck?" Like with love, with compassion, but like, yeah, that's the
Loving the F
title. The
bombs on
fuck.
this episode.
That's the title of this episode.
Yeah.
Full moon in
Yeah.
Sagittarius, I think. Um, yeah. Exactly. But just
50 unfollows.
but like with love, can we just be like, "What the fuck? What happened? Like, can we talk?" Like,
Can we try to figure it out together? Can we be
yeah.
just softer in our orientation towards trying to figure it out together. Like at the root of like it all, you know, as
Mm.
human as it is to be angry, to be frustrated, to be hateful, to be resentful, to be terrified, to be devastated, is there a pathway in which we can soften into those experiences and thus perpetuate less harm in the wake of those emotional experiences?
Yeah. And just another reminder there, there's no showing up perfectly, and it's also really human to like, I remember receiving all of this criticism and all of these like, like cruel things, um, emails, messages, handwritten letters, whatever. And I remember these waves of like getting defensive and being like, oh, what you think that, and like wanting to point out other people's flaws. And that wasn't true to what I was actually feeling, because what I was just feeling was hurt. I was feeling really, I was already beaten down, and I was just feeling broken and hurt, you know.
And how much did you have to slow down? How much did you have to nurture yourself? How much did you have to really prioritize that process in order to not allow for that hurt
Well, and so
to ooze out of you
that's
and
been the
cause?
practice for me, is I know the kind of hurt that can be created when we do not hold our emotions or process them, and we make them someone else's responsibility to fix them. And I recognize that people are always just doing their best, that's been the practice of looking at those people that did cause harm and say, okay, but maybe they were just doing their best. I don't want to cause more harm. That's not in my DNA to want to do that. It's never been. How can I do what they wouldn't? And it's a practice, because sometimes standing in my kitchen and I'm angry, and so I stomp my feet and I let my anger get expressed, but that's the practice. That is, I'm constantly asking myself, how can I show up in that way? But just recognizing.
And so maybe we leave our
Yeah.
listeners today with this contemplation. How can we contemplate and reflect upon the
Hmm.
spectrum of human nature and our humanness, what we perceive within ourselves and within ourselves in this world, and how can that process of reflection and practice of perception lead us towards more grace and compassion
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, yeah,
for
yeah,
ourselves and for
absolutely.
everyone else.
And yeah, just as we contain the space, just to share, yeah, more gratitude um, for having you here and for having this space. This feels, yeah, just like a really special space. Um, yeah. And drop your favorite board game down below.
Yeah.
And if you haven't played Skippo, let us know how it goes. Yeah.
Let us know how it goes.
Yeah.
Make sure you tell us how we changed your life.
Exactly. Um, okay. Thank you. All the love,
We're
all the
kidding.
love. This was
With all the
Birth
love.
the Middle Way.
Thank you for being here with us.